A judge mocks a homeless black boy in court. Then, moments later, 50 roaring motorcycles line up outside the courthouse. What starts as another cruel day in a small-town courtroom turns into the moment the whole nation can't stop talking about. The boy had nothing. No home, no family, just a stolen loaf of bread. And the hope that someone might finally care. But when the judge laughs at him, the crowd gasps, because no one expected who would show up next. 50 men in leather walk in, silent and unshakable, filling every seat behind that trembling boy. They're not there for revenge. They're there for justice. And they know a secret about the boy's past that changes everything. As cameras roll, hearts turn, and the judge's life spirals into guilt and redemption. When the powerful shame the helpless, who will stand up for the soul that everyone else forgot? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Snow drifted past the courthouse windows, silent and steady, like the ticking of time itself. The small town of Millstone sat under a gray winter sky, its streets half empty, its people tired from another long year of layoffs and worry. Inside the courthouse, the old radiators hissed, and Judge Walter Keene sat high on the bench, wrapped in his black robe like a man hiding from the world. His silver hair was neatly combed, his glasses polished, and his voice, when he spoke, carried a tone of finality, like someone who had long forgotten how to doubt himself. "Next case," he said flatly. "Docket number 327, theft under $50. The bailiff opened the side door, and a thin boy stepped into the courtroom. He couldn't have been more than 14. His clothes hung loose on his bony frame. His shoes had holes, and his eyes carried that tired look of someone far older. A small buzz of whispers rippled through the few people sitting in the pews. The public defender stood beside the boy, shuffling papers nervously. "Your Honor, this is Darius Cole. He's, accused of stealing a loaf of bread and a carton of milk from Harlan's Market." The judge barely looked up. "Did he now? And what's his explanation?" The boy's voice came soft and dry. "I was hungry." Judge Keene raised a brow. "So you steal. Is that what the world teaches now?" Darius said nothing. His hands fidgeted at his sides, his thin shoulders shaking. Someone in the back let out a faint chuckle, the kind that comes when people want to feel superior. The judge leaned forward, his words sharp. "You look old enough to find work, or ask for help. You think you can just take whatever you want?" The boy's head hung lower. "There ain't nobody to ask, sir." The judge's tone turned cold. "Then maybe a few days in juvenile detention will teach you something about consequences. At least there you'll get a warm meal, since you're so desperate to eat." The courtroom went silent. Then, as if on cue, someone laughed again. This time it echoed. Darius's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't cry. He just nodded faintly. In that moment, a young woman sitting in the gallery, a local reporter named Emily Grant, raised her phone, pressing record. Her fingers trembled slightly. She wasn't sure why she was doing it, but something about the scene didn't sit right in her chest. The judge straightened his papers, already moving on. "Take him away," he said, dismissing the case with a bang of his gavel. As the bailiff led Darius through the side door, the boy turned his head for a second. He looked back, not in anger, but in confusion, as if trying to understand why people could be so cruel and not even notice. That look followed the judge home. By late afternoon, the courthouse emptied. Snow was falling thicker now. Judge Keene stepped out into the cold, pulling his coat tight. The town square looked hollow, the old Christmas lights flickering weakly across dark windows. He passed the bakery, the same one his wife, Marjorie, used to love before she passed away. He could almost hear her voice again, soft, full of warmth, saying, "Walter, kindness costs nothing." He shook the thought away. At home, the house was silent, every corner neat and untouched. He reheated soup from the fridge, ate alone at the kitchen counter, and told himself he had done his job. The law didn't care about feelings. It cared about order. But sleep didn't come easily that night. The next morning, his clerk, Mrs. Donahue, rushed into chambers holding her phone. "Judge, you might want to see this." He frowned. "What is it?" She turned the screen toward him. It was the video. His courtroom, his words, his face. The caption read, "Judge mocks hungry boy for stealing food." The clip played. His own voice filled the room, echoing like a stranger's. The laughter in the background, the boy's quiet eyes, it all hit harder than he expected. By the time it ended, his throat felt dry. "Who posted this?" he asked. "It's everywhere," Mrs. Donahue said quietly. "Social media, local news, even the state paper picked it up." Judge Keene sank into his chair. "People take things out of context." "Maybe," she said softly. "But sometimes the truth doesn't need context." That night, while the world argued about his cruelty online, far away in Arizona, in a dimly lit garage filled with old motorcycles, a man called Big Red watched the same video. His weathered hands rested on the handlebars of a rusted Harley. Behind him, a dozen men stood in silence. When the video ended, Big Red let out a long breath. "That boy," he said quietly. "Cole. That's Marcus's kid." The others looked at him, surprised. He nodded, his eyes burning with purpose. "His daddy saved my life once. We ride at sunrise." Back in Millstone, the judge sat at his desk, unable to focus on the pile of paperwork before him. The house ticked with the sound of an old clock. Through the window, snow kept falling. He reached for a photo on his desk, Marjorie smiling on their wedding day, and whispered, "I just did my job, didn't I?" But her smile seemed to say otherwise. And in that moment, deep down, he knew. His life was about to change forever. The morning after the hearing broke cold and bright. Sunlight hit the courthouse steps, sparkling on old ice. By 7, 2 reporters stood shivering near the door with coffee cups in their hands. They set up tripods and checked their phones every few seconds. A headline sat at the top of every news app. "Judge mocks homeless boy for stealing bread." The clip had been posted and reposted through the night. It spread like frost on glass. Inside, the clerk's phone buzzed without pause. Mrs. Donahue turned it face down, but it buzzed again and again, like a small, loud heart that would not calm down. She breathed out and went to the judge's chambers. "Judge," she said, stopping in the doorway. "They're outside, and the phones won't stop." He pulled off his reading glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "We start at 9. The court has work to do." "They want a statement," she said. "I have no statement," he answered, voice tight. "We do not try cases on the internet." Mrs. Donahue nodded, but she didn't leave. "You should know. The governor's office called. A staffer asked for a copy of the docket and the video link." He flinched just for a moment. "I see." She set a folded paper on his desk. "A columnist says the ethics board may open a review." He lifted the paper, then set it down without reading. "The law stands," he said. "We proceed." When he stepped into the hallway, a low murmur rose like wind in a dry field. Camera lights blinked on. Questions flew. "Judge, do you regret your words? Did you know the boy was homeless? Are you going to apologize?" He did not slow. "No comment," he said, and walked through the questions like a man crossing rain. He pushed through the courtroom door and let it shut behind him. The heavy wood gave him a moment of quiet. Down the road, in a locked room with a cinder block wall, Darius sat on a low bed. A guard had left the TV on in the common area. The news looped the clip again and again. The same small scene, the same sentence. He watched himself enter the screen, head down, hands shaking. He heard the judge's voice. He heard the laugh in the gallery. He watched the bailiff take him away. Each time the clip ended, he stared at the blank space that came after, as if the screen might finally give him something new. It did not. He pulled a small pencil from his pocket. It was dull and short, the kind they gave out with forms. He wrote on the edge of a flyer he'd folded into a note the night before. "I hope prison feeds the soul, too." Then he stared at the words and felt ashamed, and did not know why. He folded the paper again, smaller this time, like he could hide his own heart inside it. Across the country, in a dusty garage in Arizona, a long table was covered with wrenches, oil rags, and a battered map. Men with gray beards and scarred knuckles leaned over their bikes. Someone checked a chain. Someone tightened a bolt. The air smelled like metal and old gasoline. A laptop sat on a milk crate. The video paused on the judge's hard face. The man they called Big Red stood beside it, his arms crossed. The men waited for him to speak. He put a finger on the map and tapped the line from their town to Millstone. "We ride," he said. "For who?" one asked, though he knew. "For the boy," Red said, "and for his father." A hush fell. They began to pack without more talk. Bedrolls, tool bags, extra gloves. One man tucked a worn leather Bible into his saddlebag and patted it like a friend. They pulled out at sunrise. Engines thundered and then settled into a steady roar. The caravan stretched to the end of the block. Neighbors came to their porches and watched with cautious eyes. A white-haired woman made the sign of the cross. A kid lifted his arm and pumped his fist at the sky. The men rode past like a long, rolling river of chrome and leather. By noon, the road unspooled under them. Desert faded to scrub, scrub to plains, plains to cold, flat fields. They stopped for gas, for coffee, for a bowl of chili in a town that had seen better days. A waitress stared at the patches on their jackets, and then at the story on the TV above the counter. She brought a basket of bread and said, "On the house." The men ate in quiet. When they left, Big Red tucked a crisp 20 under the sugar jar. Back in Millstone, the mayor called the police chief to her office. The blinds were drawn. A small heater clicked. "We can't have a biker riot," she said, keeping her voice low. "We'll be on national TV for all the wrong reasons." The chief, a tired man with careful eyes, scratched his jaw. "Ma'am, there's no sign of trouble." "There's a sign of cameras," she said. "Which is worse?" He didn't answer that. He looked at the file on her desk. It was thin. "We'll keep the peace." She nodded, then watched the snow at the window with a face like stone. "Keep the peace," she said again, as if the words alone could do it. At the courthouse, the judge pushed through his docket as if speed could drown out the noise, but each case felt like a ghost with a mirror. A woman fined for missing 2 bus transfers, a man evicted for being late after losing his job. He felt his chest tighten with each sentence he handed down. At lunch, he closed his office door and set his forehead against the cool glass of the window. Far down on Main Street, a camera van crawled by. He pulled the old photo of Marjorie from his wallet, a small, sun-faded square, edges soft. Her smile was bright and plain, like a lantern in fog. He remembered the day they had walked past the bakery, and she had pressed a warm loaf to his chest, laughing. "God gives us bread, Walter, so we can share it." He had kissed her forehead and teased her for being soft. Now the memory gave him a small ache at the base of his throat, like a crumb stuck there that would not go down. Just before sunset, His phone buzzed again. He ignored it. He packed his briefcase and left by the side door to avoid the cameras. The air cut sharp and clean. He walked with careful steps over patches of ice, past the statue in the square, past the empty fountain, past the bakery that still smelled like sugar even in the cold. He reached his porch and turned his key. The sound came then, low at first, like far thunder beyond the hills. He stood still and listened. The noise grew, a layered hum, engines in chorus. Not one, many. He turned towards the main road. Headlights crested the rise 2 by 2, then 4 by 4, then more. A long line, slow and steady, moving like a single animal with 100 hearts. The judge did not move. He stared as the first bikes entered town, as chrome flashed under streetlights, as breath steamed up from scarves and beards. The lead rider's front wheel rolled past the welcome sign. Tires hissed on wet pavement. Somewhere, a church bell rang the hour. The judge felt the sound in his ribs. He stood there in the blue evening and watched the riders come. They did not speed. They did not shout. They filled the street and kept on filling it until it seemed the town itself had grown too small. Windows on Main Street lit up one by one. People stepped to the glass and pressed their hands there. The engine settled to a deep idle, like a heartbeat that had finally come home. The judge clutched his briefcase to his side and did not know whether to step forward or step back. He only knew one thing for sure. Whatever this was, it had come for the boy. And it had come for him. By dawn, the town of Millstone buzzed with talk. People peeked through their curtains as the first motorcycles rumbled down Main Street. Their engines echoed off the brick buildings, steady and powerful, like thunder that refused to fade. Children pressed their faces to windows. Store owners stood in their doorways, clutching mugs of coffee. Nobody had seen anything like it. 50 bikers rolling in together, chrome gleaming under a pale winter sun. At the front rode a giant of a man with a red beard streaked with gray. His name was known only because someone whispered it at the diner. Big Red. He looked carved from stone, but his eyes were calm, watchful. The Iron Saints, that's what their patches said. The same men who had once filled the highways in their youth. Now older, heavier, but still carrying that fierce, unbroken brotherhood. They parked along the courthouse square, shutting down their engines one by one. The town fell into an uneasy silence. Big Red climbed off his bike, looked up at the courthouse steps, and took a long breath that turned to steam in the cold. "Looks smaller than I imagined," one biker muttered. Red's mouth curved just slightly. "Small things cause big storms." The men chuckled low. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't need to. Inside, Judge Keene sipped coffee that had long gone cold. Through the window of his chambers, he saw them. Leather jackets, patches, silver helmets stacked neatly beside the courthouse doors. His stomach twisted. Mrs. Donahue peeked through the blinds beside him. "They're here for that boy," she whispered. He frowned. "They can't interfere with a court proceeding." She hesitated. "Maybe they aren't here to interfere. Maybe they're here to be seen." The judge turned back to his desk, pretending to read the case file in front of him, but the words blurred together. For the first time in years, his hands shook slightly. A few miles away, Darius sat on his bunk at the juvenile center, staring at the tiny window above his bed. He had been quiet since the morning they showed him the news clip again, the one of the bikers riding for him. The guards whispered about it. Some laughed. Others shook their heads. One of the older guards, Officer Torres, paused at his cell. "You see the video, kid?" Darius looked up slowly. "Yeah." "You know them?" He shook his head. "Never seen them." Torres sighed. Well, somebody sure cares about you. The boy didn't answer. He wasn't sure what that word, care, was supposed to feel like anymore. Back in the courthouse, tension filled every corner. The reporters had doubled since the day before. The mayor was pacing in her office, barking orders into her phone. "Keep control," she kept saying, though nobody was sure who she was talking to. At 10 o'clock sharp, Judge Keene walked into the courtroom. The gavel hit the block with a dull crack. "Court is in session," he said. Then the doors opened. A heavy sound rolled through the air. Boots, slow and steady like a drumbeat. One by one, the Iron Saints entered. 50 men filled the back rows in silence. The scent of oil and leather drifted across the room. Darius was brought in next, thin and trembling. His eyes widened when he saw them, row after row of bikers, each one nodding at him with quiet respect. Big Red stepped forward, hands raised. "Your Honor, we ain't here to cause trouble," he said. His voice was deep, gravelly, but respectful. "We're here to stand with the boy. His daddy was one of us." A ripple ran through the room. Cameras clicked. The judge's jaw tightened. "This is a courtroom, not a spectacle." Red nodded. "Understood, sir. But this ain't about a show. It's about honor. The boy's father saved my life once. I'm here to repay the debt." Keene froze. "His father?" "Yes, sir. Marcus Cole. Died pulling me out of a burning bar 15 years ago." The name landed like a weight in the judge's chest. Marcus Cole, he remembered the case. A fire on the highway. A man who'd gone back inside to save others. The obituary had called him a hero. For the first time, something cracked in Keene's voice. "That man was his father?" "Yes, sir." The room held its breath. The judge looked at the boy, then at the bikers, then back at his notes, though he wasn't reading. For a long moment he said nothing. Finally, he cleared his throat. "The court will take a brief recess." He retreated to his chambers, shutting the door behind him. His hands went to his temples. The world outside felt like it was closing in. Cameras, engines, guilt. Mrs. Donahue stepped inside softly. "You could adjourn for the day," she said. He shook his head. "No, I started this. I'll finish it." Then his voice cracked low. "His father was a hero, and I mocked his son." She said nothing, only set down a small envelope that had been delivered earlier. "This came for you." He opened it. Inside was a single folded paper, creased and smudged. He read the shaky handwriting. "You said I'd get fed in prison. I just hope they feed the soul, too." The judge sank into his chair. The words blurred. Outside, the rumble of engines began again as the Iron Saints waited in the cold, their breath fogging the air. By evening, the story was everywhere. "50 Hells Angels defend homeless boy in court," the headlines screamed. The photo of Big Red standing behind Darius appeared on every screen. Some called it justice. Others called it chaos. But to the judge sitting alone at his kitchen table that night, it felt like a mirror held to his soul. He turned the letter over in his hands. He tried to eat dinner but couldn't swallow more than a few bites. The house felt smaller than ever, each clock tick a reminder of his own silence when he should have spoken kindness. Snow began to fall again, blanketing the streets, soft and forgiving. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of motorcycles echoed faintly through the night, steady, patient, and unafraid. The judge whispered into the stillness, "Lord, what have I done?" And for the first time in years, his heart broke wide open enough for grace to find a way in. The next morning came heavy with gray clouds. Snow had stopped falling, but the streets of Millston were slick with ice. By dawn, the courthouse steps were already crowded. News vans lined the street, their antennas raised like insect legs, reporters huddled in heavy coats, cameras ready, waiting for something to happen. And inside, the air felt charged, like a storm that had paused to take a breath. Judge Walter Keene arrived early. His driver offered to help him inside, but he waved the man off. His hand trembled slightly as he held the courthouse door open. The smell of cold air followed him in. The hallway lights flickered, the hum of old wiring filling the silence. He walked the long corridor, toward his chambers, his polished shoes echoing against the tile. When he opened the door, Mrs. Donahue was already there, stacking papers. She looked up at him with eyes full of worry. "They've been here since 6, she said softly. He hung his coat on the rack. "Who?" "The bikers, all of them. They're standing outside the courthouse doors, waiting for the session to begin." He closed his eyes briefly. "I see. And, sir?" She hesitated. "The media says the boy's mother's church raised enough money for a public attorney. They're coming too. There will be cameras inside." Judge Keene sighed. "The law doesn't answer to cameras." "Maybe not," Mrs. Donahue said, "but hearts do." He didn't reply. By 10 o'clock, the courtroom was full. The benches creaked under the weight of people packed shoulder to shoulder. Townsfolk, journalists, curious strangers who had driven hours just to see the story unfold in person. The hum of whispers filled the air. The bailiff stood at the front, uneasy. Then the door opened. Darius Cole walked in, small and pale against the polished wood. His wrists were no longer cuffed, but his shoulders were still tense, as if invisible chains held them in place. The public defender guided him forward, whispering something meant to calm him. Darius's eyes darted nervously around the room, until he saw them. 50 bikers sat behind him, row after row of leather and denim, faces rough but kind, every eye locked on him. Big Red sat at the center, his arms folded, his presence filling the space like a solid wall of protection. Darius froze for a moment, unsure if he was dreaming. Then Red gave him a small nod, one that said, "You're not alone anymore." The judge entered moments later. "All rise," the bailiff called. The room stood. Cameras flashed. Judge Keene took his seat, his gavel in hand. His eyes swept the room and stopped when they met the sea of leather jackets in the back. "I will remind everyone," he began, his voice tight, "that this is a courtroom, not a theater. Order will be maintained." Big Red rose slowly from his bench. "We're here in peace, Your Honor." His tone was deep, calm, almost fatherly. "We just came to stand with the boy. His daddy was one of ours." The judge frowned. "You're referring to Marcus Cole?" "Yes, sir," Red said. "He saved my life 15 years ago. Pulled me from a burning building when the roof was about to fall. Didn't even know me. Just did it." A low murmur filled the courtroom. Cameras zoomed in. Judge Keene leaned forward. "And you say this boy is his son?" Red nodded. "Spitting image. His daddy was a good man, Your Honor. Wouldn't have wanted this life for his kid." For a long, trembling moment, the judge said nothing. The sound of the clock ticking on the wall filled the stillness. He looked at Darius. Thin, frightened, clutching the sides of the defense table. And something shifted inside him. He spoke slowly. "The court will take a brief recess." The gavel struck the block, and he rose. The moment he left the bench, the whispers began again. Mrs. Donahue followed him into chambers. Inside, the judge's composure finally cracked. He paced behind his desk, hand pressed to his forehead. "His father. I remember that name," he muttered. "Marcus Cole. That man was a hero. Saved 3 people in a fire, and I—" He stopped himself, voice breaking. "I mocked his son for stealing food." Mrs. Donahue laid a hand on his arm. Then maybe it's not too late to do something right. He sank into his chair, weary. Maybe it is. She hesitated. A letter came for you this morning. I think you should read it. He took the envelope. The handwriting was shaky, almost childlike. When he unfolded the paper, the words blurred for a moment before his eyes focused. You said I'd get fed in prison. I just hope they feed the soul, too. There was no signature, but he knew. He folded the paper gently, set it on his desk, and pressed his palms against his eyes. Dear God, he whispered, what have I done? When the court reconvened, the air felt different. The judge looked older, smaller somehow, but softer. He adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. Mr. Cole, he said, his voice steady but kind. Do you understand the charges against you? Darius nodded. Yes, sir. Do you understand that stealing is against the law? Yes, sir. The judge paused. And do you also understand that hunger is not a crime? The room went silent. Reporters froze mid-note. Darius blinked, unsure he'd heard right. The judge continued, quieter now. The law cannot fix every broken thing, but it can show mercy. He looked out across the sea of bikers. This boy deserves a chance. I'm ordering that he be released into community mentorship under the care of the Iron Saints Motorcycle Club. The court believes redemption is better learned in family than in prison. Big Red stood. Thank you, Your Honor. Darius's lower lip trembled. For the first time in months, he smiled. When court adjourned, the crowd spilled into the square. Reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. The bikers formed a protective ring around the boy, escorting him down the courthouse steps. Judge Keene watched from his office window. Outside, Big Red rested a gloved hand on the boy's shoulder, guiding him toward a line of waiting motorcycles. The judge placed his hand on the glass. Snow began to fall again, light and soft. For the first time in years, he didn't see just a criminal or a case number. He saw a child who needed someone to believe in him. And he whispered to himself, as the bikers rode away, maybe this is how justice begins. The courthouse felt quieter the next morning. The crowds had gone, the cameras had rolled away, but a strange stillness lingered, like the echo of something sacred that had passed through. Judge Keene arrived earlier than usual, though he'd barely slept. He had spent most of the night sitting at his kitchen table, staring at the letter. The paper was worn now, edges curled where his hands had held it too long. The words haunted him. I just hope they feed the soul, too. He'd tried to push the guilt away, to drown it in logic, but it clung to him. For the first time in years, the robe he wore didn't make him feel dignified. It made him feel small. When Mrs. Donahue brought in his morning mail, she paused at the doorway. You all right, Judge? He forced a thin smile. I've been better. She nodded gently. You're human, that's all. He looked up at her, weary. Do you think it's too late for a man to start over? No, she said softly, but you've got to want to. At noon, Judge Keene drove to the Millstone Juvenile Detention Center. The last time he'd been there, he'd been younger, colder, and too proud to feel uneasy. Now his heart beat fast as he walked through the metal detector and down the corridor lined with gray doors. Officer Torres greeted him with surprise. Judge Keene, didn't expect to see you here. I'd like to visit Darius Cole, Keene said. Torres hesitated, scratching his chin. That boy's been quiet since he got back. Doesn't say much, reads the Bible a lot. You sure he wants to see you? I'm not sure, the judge admitted. But I need to see him. Torres shrugged and led the way. Inside, Darius sat on the edge of his bunk, the same folded letter in his hands, the one he'd written to the judge and thought had been lost. His dark eyes lifted when the door opened, but his face stayed blank. The judge cleared his throat, standing awkwardly near the wall. "Darius," he said softly, "I came to apologize." The boy said nothing. "I was cruel," Keene continued, his voice trembling. "You didn't deserve that. I forgot what mercy looked like." Darius studied him. "You're a judge," he said finally. "You're supposed to know right from wrong." The words hit hard. "I thought I did," Keene said quietly. "But sometimes, a man hides behind rules because he's afraid to feel." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then the boy whispered, "You ever been hungry?" The judge swallowed. "Not like you, son." "Then you don't know what it's like," Darius said. His voice cracked just slightly. "You can't think straight when you're hungry. You just want it to stop hurting." Keene nodded. "You're right. I can't know, but I can learn." He stepped closer. "Would you let me try?" The boy looked at him for a long time, then gave a small shrug. "You can try, I guess, but people say that a lot." When the judge left the facility, snow was falling again, soft and steady. He stood by his car, looking up into the gray sky. For years he had judged people by what they'd done. Now, for the first time, he wanted to know why. That evening, he found himself at St. Matthew's house, the old brick homeless shelter at the edge of town. It was run by Sister Agnes, who had been fighting poverty longer than most folks in Millston had been alive. When she saw him walk through the door, she nearly dropped the box she was carrying. "Walter Keene," she said, half shocked, half amused. "I never thought I'd see the day you'd set foot in here." He smiled faintly. "Neither did I." She raised an eyebrow. "You come to inspect the place, or the people?" "No, sister," he said softly. "I came to help." Her face softened then. "Well, the Lord does work in mysterious ways. We could use an extra pair of hands." She handed him a dish towel and pointed toward the kitchen. The Iron Saints were already there. Big Red and a few of his brothers fixing a broken pipe beneath the sink, grease-stained and laughing like it was the best work they'd ever done. The judge hesitated in the doorway, watching them. Big Red noticed him and stood, wiping his hands on a rag. "Didn't expect you here, Your Honor." "I'm not a judge right now," Keene said. "Just a man who's got a lot to make right." Red nodded, smiling a little. "That's a good start." The men worked side by side that evening. The judge washed dishes, his sleeves rolled up. He'd never done something so humble in years, but it felt good. Real. Human. Darius peeked from the doorway once or twice, but stayed back, watching quietly. When the work was done, Sister Agnes served soup and bread to the residents. The judge sat among them, listening to stories. Hard lives told in simple words. Some were funny, some were heartbreaking, but all were true. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was above anyone. Later, as he prepared to leave, Big Red walked him out to his car. The night was quiet, the sky full of falling snow. "Didn't think you had it in you, Judge," Red said with a grin. "Neither did I," Keene admitted. Red nodded toward the shelter. "That boy looks up to you now. He'd never say it, but I can tell." Keene looked back at the building, where warm light glowed through the windows. "He deserves better than what I gave him." "You're giving it now," Red said. "Sometimes that's enough." The judge smiled faintly. "Sometimes." When he drove home that night, he passed the courthouse. The tall stone building loomed against the dark sky, proud but cold. For the first time, he saw it differently, not as a symbol of justice, but of walls he'd built around his own heart. At a red light, he looked at the letter lying on the passenger seat. It was folded neatly, but he could still see the first line through the paper. "I just hope they feed the soul, too." He whispered into the stillness, "I'm trying, son. I really am." and when the light turned green, he drove on through the snow, his heart a little lighter than before. The next week brought a quiet thaw to Millstone. Snow melted into puddles along the curbs, and the gray skies lightened. But inside Judge Walter Keene, something far greater had begun to thaw, a heart that had been frozen for years. He'd returned to the courthouse out of duty, but his work no longer felt the same. Each case now carried faces instead of names, stories instead of files. When he read a report, he wondered about the people behind it, their hunger, their struggle, their hope. Still, his mind kept circling back to one thing: Darius Cole. Every night after court, the judge drove past St. Matthew's house, watching from his car as Big Red and his bikers worked late into the evening, hammering, painting, repairing the old shelter's broken windows. The sound of laughter and country music drifted through the cold air, mixing with the glow of warm light spilling from inside. He wanted to stop, but he always kept driving. Guilt still whispered that he didn't belong there. Until one morning, he finally did stop. The judge walked into Sister Agnes's office, holding a folder under his arm. She looked up from her paperwork and smiled faintly. "Back again so soon? You'll make a habit of this yet." "I need to talk to you," he said. "About the boy?" He nodded. "He's still in detention, but I've been reading through his case. There's something I can do." Sister Agnes folded her hands. "What are you thinking?" He took a breath. "A supervised release into community mentorship, under someone responsible, someone the court can trust." Her eyes brightened. "You mean Big Red?" "Yes," he said. "If he'll take the boy in, I can sign the order." "That's bold," she said, half smiling. "I didn't think you had bold left in you." He gave a small, tired laugh. "Neither did I." That afternoon, he found Big Red behind the shelter, tuning a motorcycle. Red looked up as the judge approached, wiping grease off his hands. "You look like a man with something on his mind," he said. "I do." Keene handed him the folder. "This is Darius's case file. If you're willing to vouch for him, I can release him under your supervision." Red flipped through the papers, frowning. "That means he lives with me?" "It means he learns from you," the judge said. "You'll guide him, keep him out of trouble, help him rebuild his life. He needs a father figure, someone he can trust." Red looked thoughtful for a moment, then nodded. "I owe his daddy that much. You sign the papers, Judge, and I'll make sure the boy doesn't let you down." "I'm not worried about that," Keene said softly. "I'm worried about letting him down." 2 days later, under a clear morning sky, Darius stepped out of the detention center. The cold air hit his face like freedom. Big Red was waiting by his motorcycle, a spare helmet in his hand. Darius blinked at him. "You really gonna let me ride that thing?" Red chuckled. "Not yet. You're riding in the truck behind it, but maybe someday." The boy grinned for the first time in months, climbing into the passenger seat. Red started the engine, and the truck rumbled down the road toward the shelter. In the side mirror, Darius caught a glimpse of the courthouse fading into the distance. For the first time, he didn't feel afraid of it. That evening, the shelter kitchen buzzed with sound. The bikers had made a big dinner to welcome Darius home: chili, cornbread, and enough laughter to shake the old walls. The boy sat between Big Red and Sister Agnes, smiling shyly as they teased him about his appetite. Across the room, Judge Keene stood near the doorway, watching quietly. He had come unannounced, unsure if he belonged there. But when Sister Agnes spotted him, she waved him over with a knowing smile. "Join us," she said. He hesitated. "I didn't come to intrude." "Then don't," she said simply. "Come to eat." And so he did. The food was plain but good. The warmth of the room felt almost foreign to him, like sunlight in a place that had been dark too long. He found himself laughing, really laughing, at a story one of the bikers told about their road trip through Nebraska. After dinner, Darius approached him, holding 2 mugs of cocoa. "You don't like coffee, right? I remember you said that once." The judge smiled faintly. "You remember that?" The boy nodded. "You looked like a cocoa guy." They sat on the steps outside, steam curling from their cups. After a while, Darius spoke softly. "You really think I can change?" The judge looked at him. "You already have." The boy studied the snow-dusted ground. "I don't know. Sometimes I still feel like that scared kid in the courtroom." Keen nodded slowly. "I feel like that too sometimes." Darius glanced up, surprised. "You?" "Yes," he said. "Everyone does. We just hide it better when we're older." Later that night, as the shelter quieted, Big Red found the judge at the door putting on his coat. "Leaving already?" Red asked. "It's late," Keen said. "You've done good work here." Red nodded. "So have you. Don't sell yourself short." The judge smiled. "I'll try not to." As he stepped outside, the moonlight hit the freshly repaired sign above the door. St. Matthew's House, a place for hope. He looked back once more, seeing Darius laughing with the bikers through the window. His laughter was real, full, unguarded. And for the first time in years, Judge Walter Keen walked away from something feeling proud. Not of a verdict, not of a sentence, but of a second chance given to someone who needed it more than most. He whispered into the crisp night air, "Maybe this is what justice was supposed to be all along." By the following week, Millstone was buzzing again. But this time the noise wasn't just from motorcycles. It was from talk. In diners, barbershops, and church basements, people argued about the judge and the boy. Some called what had happened a miracle. Others muttered it was a mistake. The town had always been slow to change, but now it was waking up in fits and starts, half proud, half angry. Judge Walter Keen could feel it in every stare when he walked down Main Street. He had become the face of something he didn't fully understand. Mercy, maybe, or forgiveness, but not everyone wanted either. One morning, while sipping coffee at the diner, he overheard 2 men in the booth behind him. "Can you believe that judge?" one said. "Letting that kid off easy just because some bikers scared him." "Yeah," the other replied. "If I stole bread when I was 14, my old man would have tanned my hide. These days, everyone just makes excuses." The words stung, though Keen tried to ignore them. He had once sounded just like that. He paid for his coffee, left a quiet tip, and walked out into the cold. Across the street he saw Emily Grant, the reporter who'd filmed the courtroom video. She smiled faintly and crossed over. "Morning, Judge," she said. He nodded politely. "Ms. Grant." "I was hoping to ask you for a quote," she said. "People are still talking about what you did. The country's divided. Some think you went soft. Others think you found your soul." Keen managed a small smile. "Maybe it's a little of both." Emily's expression softened. "If it helps, I think you did the right thing." He tilted his head. "Why?" "Because I saw his face, Judge. That boy didn't need punishment. He needed someone to believe in him." He looked at her for a moment before replying quietly. "Then maybe he saved me more than I saved him." At St. Matthew's House, the air was full of change, too. Big Red and his men had nearly finished repairing the roof. They built a new fence, painted the walls, and set up a small wood shop out back for the residents to learn basic carpentry. Darius worked alongside them every day after school. His hands were small but strong, his grin wide as he helped sand down planks and carry tools. He didn't talk much about the past anymore, but sometimes, When the others laughed too loud, he'd fall quiet, like a boy remembering hunger in the middle of plenty. One afternoon, Big Red found him sitting alone behind the shed, tracing his father's name, Marcus Cole, carved into an old biker tag Red had given him. "You all right, kid?" Red asked, leaning on the fence. Darius nodded. "Yeah, just thinking about my dad." Red crouched beside him. "You know, he wasn't scared of fire. Said if you ran from one, it'd chase you forever. But if you faced it, it couldn't hurt you the same way again." The boy smiled a little. "He sounds brave." "He was," Red said. "But so are you." That weekend, Sister Agnes called a small community gathering at the shelter. People came bearing food, soup, cornbread, casseroles, and though some were still wary of the bikers, curiosity won out. When the judge arrived, the hum of conversation quieted for a moment. He wasn't wearing his robe, just a simple gray coat. He nodded at a few familiar faces, feeling awkward but determined. Sister Agnes clapped her hands. "Friends, we've come a long way. A month ago, this place was half falling apart. Now look at it. Warm, safe, alive. And it's not just the walls that got rebuilt. Maybe hearts did too." A few people clapped softly. Big Red smiled, raising a hand in greeting. "We didn't come here to prove nothing. We came here to work, and to say thank you for letting us help." The crowd warmed a little, the tension easing. Even a few children came forward to ask about the motorcycles. The judge found himself laughing again, really laughing, as he watched Darius show a little boy how to hold a hammer. For a moment, it felt like peace. That night, the peace shattered. When the last of the guests had gone home, Sister Agnes stepped outside to lock the gate and froze. Red spray paint glared against the shelter's brick wall. "Thugs out. Go back where you came from." She covered her mouth, whispering, "Lord, help us." The next morning, Darius saw it, his eyes filled with tears he tried to hide. "They hate us," he murmured. Big Red crouched beside him. "Some folks fear what they don't understand, but we don't answer hate with hate." He handed Darius a paint roller. "Come on, let's cover it up." One by one, the bikers joined in. They painted over every hateful word, their strokes slow and steady, turning the red letters into clean white walls again. When Judge Keene arrived later that morning, he saw them working in silence. "Who did this?" he asked. "No idea," Red said simply. "Doesn't matter. We fix things, not break them." The judge looked at the fresh coat of paint and nodded. "Then I'll help." He grabbed a brush and started painting. For a while, no one spoke. The sound of bristles against brick filled the air. It was a humble sound, but to anyone listening close, it was the sound of healing. That evening, the town's pastor invited Judge Keene to speak at Sunday service. He hadn't stood before a congregation in years. The church was packed, some curious, some critical. He stepped up to the pulpit, his voice soft at first but steady. "I came here to talk about mercy," he began. "I spent most of my life believing justice was about punishment, but I was wrong. True justice isn't cold, it's compassionate. It lifts people instead of crushing them, and sometimes it starts with one small act of kindness." He paused, scanning the crowd. "If a hungry boy can find forgiveness, maybe a proud old man can too." Silence filled the church. Then, slowly, applause. That night, the judge walked home beneath falling snow. The town felt different, still divided, but a little gentler. Windows glowed. Somewhere in the distance, the faint hum of motorcycles echoed like a hymn. For the first time in years, Judge Walter Keene whispered a prayer not out of duty, but gratitude. And as he reached his front porch, he looked up at the stars and thought, maybe change starts slow, but it starts all the same. Winter's chill returned to Millstone with sudden vengeance. The winds howled through the empty streets, and the air carried the sharp bite of ice. At St. Matthew's house, the shelter was finally starting to feel like a home again. The walls were bright with new paint, the pipes no longer leaked, and laughter had begun to echo through the halls every evening. Darius had started sleeping through the night again. Big Red made sure of it. He gave the boy chores, simple ones, like cleaning tools, sweeping the floors, or helping Sister Agnes prepare dinner. It gave Darius a sense of purpose, a rhythm. But that night, as the wind moaned outside, even Red couldn't shake a strange unease in his chest. It started just after midnight. A thin wisp of smoke drifted from the east wing of the shelter. At first, no one noticed. It was too faint, too soft. Then, within minutes, the alarms shrieked to life. "Fire!" someone yelled. Panic erupted. Residents rushed from their bunks, coughing and shouting. Sister Agnes ran down the hall, waving a flashlight. "Stay low! Everyone outside, now!" Big Red burst through the kitchen door, eyes wide as the smoke thickened. "Get everyone out!" he shouted. His voice boomed through the chaos. Darius stumbled out of his room, clutching the small wooden tag his father's name was carved into. The heat licked at the walls. Flames spread fast, crawling up the old boards like angry fingers. "Move, kid!" a biker shouted, pulling him toward the exit. But over the roar of fire, Darius heard something. A cry. It came from the nursery. A little girl's voice. He froze. Then he ran back inside. "Darius!" Big Red shouted after him, coughing from the smoke. But the boy had already vanished into the flames. The hallway glowed orange. Darius covered his mouth with his sleeve, eyes watering. "It's okay," he shouted. "I'm coming." He found her, a small girl, no older than 5, curled under a table, clutching a doll. He scooped her up, heart pounding, and turned toward the exit. The smoke was thicker now. He could barely see. A door burst open. Big Red appeared, face streaked with soot. "There you are." He grabbed Darius's arm. "Come on, son." They stumbled through the smoke together, the little girl crying into Darius's shirt. Outside, cold air hit them like a wave. Firefighters were already pulling hoses from the trucks, shouting orders. The shelter burned bright against the dark sky, sparks flying into the night like lost stars. Sister Agnes stood barefoot in the snow, rosary in hand, tears streaking her face. "Thank God!" she cried when she saw the boy and the child alive. But Darius collapsed to his knees, coughing hard. Big Red wrapped a blanket around his shoulders. "You did good, kid. Real good." By morning, the fire was out, but St. Matthew's house was gone. Only a blackened shell remained. Smoke rose in thin trails, curling into the pale dawn. The bikers stood in silence, staring at what was left of the place they had rebuilt with their own hands. Sister Agnes prayed softly under her breath. "The Lord gives, and the Lord takes away." Darius sat on the back of a truck, eyes distant. He held the little girl's doll, the one he'd saved from the fire, but said nothing. His clothes smelled of smoke, his hands trembled. Big Red stood beside him, resting a heavy hand on his shoulder. "You're a brave kid, you know that?" Darius shook his head. "I just didn't want her to die." "That's what bravery is," Red said quietly. Across town, Judge Keene was reading the morning paper when he saw the headline, "Fire Destroys Local Shelter. Bikers Blamed for Negligence." He dropped his coffee cup. Within an hour, he was at the scene. Police cars blocked the road. Reporters hovered like vultures, snapping pictures of the charred remains. He found Sister Agnes sitting on a folding chair, wrapped in a blanket. "Sister," he said, kneeling beside her, "are you all right?" She nodded weakly. Everyone got out. The boy saved a child. Relief washed over him, then anger. Who started this rumor about the bikers? People need someone to blame, she whispered. They don't understand what these men have done. He stood, fury boiling inside him. Then I'll make them understand. That evening, Judge Keene called a town meeting at the old courthouse. The room was packed. Some came to mourn, others came to accuse. The air was sharp with tension. The fire at St. Matthew's House, the judge began, standing behind the podium, was an accident. The investigation is ongoing. But I will tell you this. Those men you call thugs risked their lives saving strangers. One of them carried a child through smoke and flame. That boy you once mocked, he's the reason that child is alive. A murmur spread through the crowd. The judge's voice rose, steady and strong. You want justice? Here it is. You can build walls of hate, or you can build homes of mercy, but you can't do both. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then, slowly, a few people began to clap. That night, the applause still echoed in his mind as he drove home. But when he pulled into his driveway, the weight of loss returned. The shelter was gone. Dozens were displaced. The boy he'd come to care for had almost died. He stepped out of his car and looked up at the winter sky. "Why, Lord?" he whispered. "Why take away what we just started to build?" But the night gave no answer. Only the soft fall of snow, landing silently on ashes. The next morning, Sister Agnes knocked on his door. Her face was grave. "Darius is gone," she said. He froze. "Gone?" He left before sunrise, left a note on the steps. She handed him a scrap of paper, smudged with ash. The judge unfolded it. "Don't fight for me. I'm not worth it." His heart sank. He closed his eyes, whispering, "Oh, son, you were always worth it." And as dawn broke over Millstone, Judge Walter Keene knew what he had to do next. He had to find that boy, before it was too late. Snow fell again that morning, slow and heavy, covering the ashes of St. Matthew's House like a white blanket. The town was quiet, but Judge Walter Keene's mind was not. He couldn't stop seeing the words from Darius's note. "Don't fight for me. I'm not worth it." It echoed in his chest like an unanswered prayer. By 8 o'clock, he was in his car, driving through the gray streets of Millstone. His coat was buttoned wrong, his tie crooked, but he didn't care. The boy was out there somewhere, alone, scared, probably freezing. He couldn't lose him, not after everything. He stopped first at the bus station. The clerk shook his head. "No kid by that name bought a ticket," he said. Then the judge checked the train depot. Nothing. He walked the alleys behind the grocery store, the park benches near the river, and the old factory lot where homeless folks sometimes stayed. Every corner of town, every shadow. Still nothing. When he finally stopped to rest, his hands were shaking. Big Red found him sitting on the hood of his car in the parking lot of an old diner. "You look beat," Red said, walking up with 2 steaming cups of coffee. Keene shook his head. "He's gone. He could be anywhere." Red handed him a cup. "He's not gone. That boy's got a heart like his old man. When life knocks him down, he don't run far. He hides close." Keene frowned. "Close?" Red nodded toward the hills beyond town. His father used to take him fishing up near the steel bridge before the accident. If I were that kid, I'd go where the world still felt like family. Keene's eyes widened. The bridge. Red grinned faintly. "Come on, Judge. Let's bring our boy home." By afternoon, half the Iron Saints were riding in slow formation through the back roads, engines rumbling like thunder under the gray sky. Keene followed in his old sedan, headlights cutting through the falling snow. The wind howled through the trees, carrying the smell of pine and frost. They stopped at every crossing, every abandoned cabin, shouting Darius's name. Some townsfolk joined the search, handing out blankets, coffee, and flashlights. Even Officer Torres from the detention center came, saying quietly, "That boy doesn't deserve another cold night." The judge thanked him, voice rough with emotion. "None of us do," he said. By nightfall, the snow had thickened. They reached the edge of town, where the river cut through the valley and the old steel bridge stretched across it, rusted, lonely, and half frozen. Keene got out of the car, squinting through the wind. "Darius," he called. His voice echoed off the water. "Darius!" For a long moment, there was nothing but the sound of snow hitting metal. Then, a faint cough. Keene froze. "Did you hear that?" Red lifted his flashlight toward the bridge's underside. There, huddled under the iron beams, was a small figure wrapped in a torn blanket. "Darius!" Keene shouted again, stumbling through the snow toward him. The boy looked up weakly, his face pale, lips blue. "I told you not to come," he whispered. Keene fell to his knees beside him, pulling off his coat and wrapping it around the boy's shoulders. "You think I could just let you go? Not a chance." Tears welled in Darius's eyes. "I messed everything up, Judge. The shelter burned down. It's my fault. I don't belong anywhere." Keene's voice cracked. "No, son. That fire wasn't your fault. And you belong right here, with people who love you." The boy shook his head. "Why do you care?" "Because once," the judge said softly, "someone cared for me when I didn't deserve it either. I lost my way. You helped me find it again." For a moment, neither spoke. The snow fell between them, gentle and endless. Then Darius leaned forward, crying quietly against the judge's chest. Big Red knelt beside them, his big hands steady on both their shoulders. "Let's get you home, kid," he said. "You've got a whole town waiting to see you again." They carried Darius back to the truck, wrapping him in blankets. As they drove down the winding road toward town, the headlights cast long, golden lines across the snow. Keene sat beside him, making sure he stayed awake. "Judge," Darius murmured. "Yes, son? Do you think God forgives people like us?" Keene smiled faintly. "He already did. We're just catching up to it." Darius nodded, his eyes closing in peace for the first time in days. When they reached the edge of Millstone, the church bells were ringing for evening prayer. The townspeople had gathered with lanterns and flashlights, waiting for news. When the truck pulled in, cheers broke out. Sister Agnes ran forward, crossing herself and whispering, "Thank you, Lord." The judge stepped out first, then helped Darius down. The boy blinked at the crowd, his breath turning to mist in the cold. Someone handed him a cup of hot cocoa, and he smiled shyly. Big Red raised a gloved hand to quiet everyone. "He's safe," he said simply, "and that's all that matters." The crowd applauded again, some wiping tears from their eyes. Later that night, after the commotion had faded, Judge Keene walked Darius to the shelter's remains. The snow sparkled on the ashes, soft and pure. "This place will rise again," Keene said quietly. Darius looked up at him. "You really think so?" "I know so, because you'll help rebuild it. And so will I." The boy smiled, a small but certain smile. "Then I guess I better stick around." Keene placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say." The snow kept falling, but the night no longer felt cold. The bridge, the fire, the fear, they were all behind them now. And as they walked back toward the faint glow of town lights, Judge Keene realized that sometimes redemption didn't come from a courtroom or a verdict. It came from finding one lost child in the snow and refusing to give up. The wind howled through the trees as dawn crept over the frozen hills. The old steel bridge shimmered with frost, silver against the pale morning light. Judge Keen's car rolled to a stop beside the riverbank. The headlights dimmed, and silence followed, broken only by the soft crunch of snow under his shoes. He saw Darius huddled under the bridge, wrapped in a blanket far too thin for the cold. The boy's lips trembled, his hands clutching the tag with his father's name carved into it. "Darius," the judge said gently, kneeling beside him. "You're safe now. We're here." The boy blinked, eyes wet. "You shouldn't have come." Keen's voice softened. "You think I could sleep knowing you were out here? Not a chance." Big Red approached slowly, his heavy boots sinking in the snow. He crouched beside them, his breath fogging in the cold air. "We've been looking everywhere, kid. You scared us good." Darius lowered his head. "I didn't mean to. I just thought I made too much trouble." The judge shook his head. "No, son. Trouble isn't who you are. It's what you've been through. And we don't leave family behind." For a moment, no one spoke. Then the boy leaned forward and buried his face against the judge's chest. The man's old hands trembled as he wrapped them around the shivering child. Big Red stood and turned toward the road. "Let's take him home," he said quietly. Together they walked through the snow, the river whispering beneath the bridge, the first light of morning warming their faces. And for the first time in a long time, Judge Walter Keen felt something stronger than guilt. He felt peace. News of Darius's rescue spread through Millstone faster than the morning sun melted the frost. By noon, the whole town knew the boy was safe. The story traveled from the bakery to the church, from coffee shops to classrooms, and something in the town's heart began to change. At the edge of Main Street, volunteers gathered in thick coats, armed with hammers, shovels, and blankets. The Iron Saints rolled up in their trucks, parking beside them. Big Red climbed out first, grinning beneath his frost-covered beard. "Looks like we've got work to do," he said. Judge Keen arrived moments later, his breath clouding the air. He nodded to the crowd. "We lost a building," he said, "but we didn't lose what mattered. We still have each other." The Hi-Ho townspeople clapped. Even those who had doubted before stepped forward to help. Sister Agnes directed the efforts, organizing supplies while the pastor led a quiet prayer of thanks. Throughout the afternoon, bikers and townsfolk worked side by side, hauling timber, clearing debris, laughing between shivers. Darius, wearing Red's oversized jacket, handed out hot cocoa and smiled at everyone who passed. By sunset, the burned ground was cleared. Lanterns glowed in the cold air, lighting faces full of hope. The judge stood beside Darius, gazing at the open lot. "See that, son?" he said quietly. "Sometimes God rebuilds things stronger the second time." Darius nodded, eyes shining. "I think he's rebuilding us too." Spring sunlight warmed Millstone. Where ashes once lay, a new St. Matthew's house stood bright and strong. The sign above its doors read, "A place for hope." People from every part of town gathered for the reopening. Laughter and the smell of fresh bread filled the air. The Iron Saints stood beside townsfolk who once feared them, everyone smiling. Sister Agnes spoke first. "Love built this place," she said. "Mercy made it last." Big Red nodded to Darius. The boy stepped forward holding a loaf of bread. "I used to think nobody cared," he said softly, "but kindness proved me wrong." Judge Keen joined him. "Justice once ruled my heart," he said, "but mercy set it free." He placed the loaf beside a photo of Darius's father. Sunlight touched the bread like a blessing. The bells rang clear. Darius smiled. "We made it." Keen nodded. "Yes, son, we did." Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.